Novel Marxist criticism on Oliver Twist. So this is the book of Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Oliver Twist, also known as The Parish Boy's Progress, is a novel written by Charles Dickens, first published in 1838. The story is about an orphan named Oliver who lives in a badly run home for orphans. Then he is transferred to a workhouse. Then he escapes to London, where he meets Jack Dawkins. Jack introduces him to Fajan, who is his benefactor and also the one who taught the orphan boys to pickpocket for him. After many challenges Oliver faces in the city, he is adopted by Mr. Brownlow and the Malays then live happily. For your information, Charles Dickens himself had experience of being a child factory laborer when he was young. So what is Marxism? Marxism is an ideology or socio-economic theory founded by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels with the aim to bring classless society based on the common ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange. It is also known as a theory that analyzes how social class, money, and means of production affect society. The principles of Marxism can be applied in analyzing literary works, although it was not created for that purpose. So this is Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels who founded the Marxism. Class conflict. One of the reasons Oliver Twist can be viewed from Marxism is due to the class conflict issue portrayed vividly in the novel. Dickens emphasized on the upper class people are more powerful and crueler towards the lower class people. This can be seen through a character in the novel, Mr. Bumble, who is a greedy master of a workhouse where children, including Oliver, are forced to work with insufficient food, low salary, and bad shelter condition provided for them, Marx and Engels stated. The fundamental ideology of communism, it holds that all people are entitled to enjoy the fruits of their labor but are prevented from doing so in a capitalist economic system, which divides society into two classes, which is the non-working workers and non-working owners. Hence, Marx's idea that a society should be a classless is supported by the portrayal of bad condition of the society due to the class conflict in Oliver Twist. The alienation process that is faced by the exploited children in Oliver Twist shows that this issue can be criticized from the Marxist views. According to Encyclopedia of Marxism, alienation refers to the process whereby people become foreign to the world they are living in. So, who are the victims of alienation process in Oliver Twist? There are evidences of alienation happen in the exploited children's life, including Oliver. The unfortunate children are restricted and controlled by their masters from having any social relationships with the outside world. Aside from being supervised strictly by the upper class people, the children are also being alienated from the society due to their long working hours and being de-skilled in the workhouse. From Marxist critics, this happened rather due to the capitalist system within a society that the powerful people only think about making profits without any thinking about the oppression in the lower class people. Thus, it is significant for a society to make sure none of the society members faces the alienation process because each human being deserves to be a healthy social life as suggested in Marxism. For the economic struggle, another crucial issue portrayed in Oliver Twist that can be criticized from Marxist theory is the economic struggle of lower class people in 19th century in London. Through the story, Dickens raised awareness regarding the suffering of the poor due to the injustice treatment and bad condition of their life. Besides, Dickens illustrated how the poor really live by describing the condition of their shelters and the jobs they do to sustain the living. For example, Nancy, a female character in the novel who is a member of of lower class, commits prostitution in order to gain money. This shows that the lower class people, including the women, had no choice that led them to do bad things due to their poverty and problem. Other than that, the group that is desperate in getting money in Oliver Twist also consists of children who are orphans, so they have to pickpocket. In result, their economic struggles lead them to crimes and the downfall of moral values that affect negatively in the society. This kind of problem has led Marx and Engels to suggest the ideas that a society should be classless and should be paid equally to establish a better society. In short, economic struggle is presented in Oliver Twist really can be criticized from Marxist views. For the analysis, in Twist, Charles Dickens managed to direct the reader's attention to the struggles between the proletariat, those of the unemployed under and working class, and the bourgeois, those having power over the working and underclass. It explains that Dickens has been significant for traditional Marxist criticism in that his texts deal explicitly with social issues. Both Marx and Engels call for the rights of all people, especially the proletariat or the lower class citizens on whose backs and bourgeoisie have built their empire. In the following quotation, Dickens does not shy away from satirizing governmental institutions for the mistreatment of the proletariat, or to be more specific, of the poor and helpless children in child farms. For the evidence number one, the parish authorities magnanimously and humanely resolved that Oliver should be farmed under the parental superintendence of an elderly female who receives the culprits at and for the consideration of 7 pence halfpenny per small head per week. 7 pence halfpennies worth per week is a good round diet for a child. The elderly female was a woman of wisdom and experience. She knew what was good for children, and she had a very accurate perception of what was good for herself. So she appropriated the greater part of the weekly stipend to her own use and consigned the rising parochial generation to even a shorter allowance than was originally provided for them, thereby finding in the lowest depth deeper still, and proving herself a very great experimental philosopher. For the explanation, the above quotation shows Dickens' great use of irony and satire of the superintendent of the farm where Oliver is brought up. The words magnanimously and humanly, in combination with the phrases a woman of wisdom and experience and a great experimental philosopher, give the impression that this workhouse is honorable and compassionate, whereas the underlying message proves the opposite. Children are malnourished, and the superintendent acts purely out of self-interest. Dickens' use of irony makes the novel more humorous and therefore more palatable for its audience. By satirizing governmental institutions like this, he ensures that the reader receives the message he wishes to convey, while still making the novel pleasant to read. Other than vilifying capitalism and the abuse of governmental institutions, Dickens also focuses on the inequality originating from classism. While writing the process in which Oliver, who originally belonged to the upper class, is mistakenly taken for an underclass citizen as he is born into a workhouse as an orphan. Dickens illustrated what unfavorable consequences can originate from being born in a lower class. For the evidence number two, and what an excellent example of the power of dress young Oliver Twist was, wrapped in the blanket which had hitherto formed his only covering. He might have been the child of a nobleman or a beggar. It would have been hard for the haughtiest stranger to have fixed his station in society. But now he was enveloped in the old calico robes that had grown yellow in the same service. He was badged and ticketed and fell into his place at once. A parish child, the orphan of a workhouse, the humble half-starved drudge, rather, to be cuffed and buffeted through the world, despised by all and pitied by none. For the explanation, the above passage from the novel reveals the opinion or pants of the Victorian English community. They were underclass citizens who were entitled to nothing but in need of help. Therefore, these needy underclass citizens were considered as Notions rather than actual human beings. This description of clothing and of class in particular, sets the tone of the events in Oliver's latter life. The yellow robes symbolize overuse and monotony as they are used for the other orphans over and over again. With the phrases a parish child in the orphan of a workhouse, Dickens suggests that Oliver is labeled with the stamp of the underclass. The use of the adjectives humbles, half-starved, buffeted illustrates that he has come to meet his fate, which is to be an obedient prisoner of the class system, who is denied good care and education and destined to be judged by all. Adding the phrase despised by all, pitied by none, emphasizes this depiction of an underclass orphan child and proves that members of the underclass were considered despicable and deserved no respect. For the evidence number 3, my dear child, said the gentleman, moved by the warmth of Oliver's sudden appeal, you need not to be afraid of my deserting you, unless you give me cause. I never will, sir, interposed Oliver. I hope not, rejoined the old gentleman. I do not think you ever will. I have been deceived before in the objects whom I have endeavored to benefit. But I feel strongly disposed to trust you, nevertheless, and more strongly interested in your behalf than I can well account for, even to myself. The persons on whom I have bestowed my dearest love lie deep in their graves, but although the happiness and delight of my life lie buried there too, I have not made a coffin of my heart and sealed it up forever on my best affections. Deep affliction rather has only made them stronger. It also, I think, for it should refine our nature. For the explanation, Mr. Brownlow shows to have a great faith in Oliver even after suspecting him after stealing his handkerchief. The question here is whether Dickens has chosen to make Mr. Brownlow trust Oliver because of his exemplary moral goodness or because of the fact that Oliver originally belongs to the upper class. This analysis dares to argue that Oliver's moral goodness and social heritage are one and the same. Overall, people of the Victorian era believed that class and virtue were inextricably linked. Therefore, those of the underclass were almost always seen as immoral, and those belonging to the upper class were considered to have a virtuous personalities. This we can detect in the characters of Fajan and Sakes, who are members of the underclass and whose natures demonstrates sinfulness and immortality, and those of Rose and Miss Miley, who belong to the upper class and proved to be trustworthy and moral ladies. Even though it is speculation, as there is no option to ask Dickens why Mr. Brownlow chose to trust Oliver by the sight of him. It would be plausible to assert that because of Mr. Brownlow is of the upper class, he has the ability to recognize Oliver's honorable nature and therefore chooses to trust him. So for the conclusion, Marxist and Dickens have similar ideas in criticizing a sick society due to the issues of class conflict, alienation, and economic struggle in British society during Victorian era depicted in Oliver Twist. As they exploited children in the novel are repressed and received social injustice under capitalism, they face challenge in their lives since young that lead them to commit crimes. After analyzing the story from Marxist perspectives, it makes us realize that oppression and unjust treatment on lower class people should not happen, as they are also members of the society who are normally human beings. Hence, we might be able to solve these crucial issues by looking from Marxist perspectives. And that's the end of my novel analysis.